I would like to welcome you to another interview today. I have been doing a series of interviews with incredible women who are perpetually pursuing a multitude of purposes in life, and the way that they interact, the way their approach is very unique and incredibly inspiring as they continue to move forward with all of these many facets of life that they have decided to grasp hold of. Today, I'm interviewing Anjanette Barr. We are literally half a globe apart from each other. She is in Juneau, Alaska. I am in Paris, France. Anjanette, could you please tell a little bit about yourself? Um, where you are in life right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. It's going to be really fun to chat with you. And so I do live in Juneau, and I am currently a literary agent. And throughout the course of kind of my adult career transitions, I've mostly done things in the writing, publishing realm, but lots of other creative side projects have gotten me where I am. And I have 4 children, and they range in ages from 7 to 14, all about to have their birthdays. So we're just about to level up. And my husband is here in local government. So we're both working now, but my time is much more flexible, which is one of the reasons that I chose to be a literary agent. And I homeschool my kids. So all 4 of them are at home with me, and my oldest is his first year in high school.
Super exciting. Can you describe like your personality, your strengths? Like, what is it about you that allows you to put together all the pieces that you do?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've taken a million of those personality quizzes, and sometimes begrudgingly. And sometimes, they give you different answers, and you think, so it's funny when I found out there's actually a personality that's skeptical of those personality quizzes, that's something that's like, oh, well, that makes sense. And I border on that, but really what my personal kind of discernment about me has led me to understand is that I'm just kind of an enthusiast. So, that makes me, sometimes it feels a little scattered because I like a lot of different things. I'm very eclectic in what I am interested in. It's not hard for me to get interested in something. And so for a long time, I did feel like, when am I going to find that, that thing that I'm going to narrow it down to? And a friend invited me to take kind of a 6-month-long deep dive into your gifts, and in Catholicism we call it your charisms, your specific talents that, like, really when you use them, it's very effective. So it's not just what you're good at, but like how you can impact the world. And again, I did that very begrudgingly. I'm like, I just don't need another personality inventory in my life. But because, there was peer pressure and it was a group of us, I went ahead and went through it. And it was so enriching to think deeply through not just who I am, but also what I enjoy and where I've gotten feedback from the world that tells me that, I'm making a difference. And so I narrowed in on writing because that's something that I've always done, in some capacity. And then we took 6 months to try different types of writing. Everyone's thing was different in the group. Everyone came up with one thing to kind of test first. And I got to try things like editing fiction versus editing on a newspaper. I tried writing poetry terribly. I tried, some other things. And all of that, reinforced what I kind of already knew about myself, was that it's not for me just about the creating of the thing. It's being in the world, surrounded by the things that I'm passionate about. And that was really helpful in a lot of ways, not just in my publishing and writing career, but just to kind of allow myself to be who I am, which is someone who is not a specialist always. Sometimes I just like to learn about a lot of things. And, with homeschooling, that's perfect because I can lean into the interests of my children without feeling like I don't want to study this. This isn't interesting. I can essentially, I can make myself interested in almost anything. There are a few that I probably will never enjoy, but a few topics. But not too many, really. And it's great to finally, it took me almost 40 years, but to kind of realize that who I am is just who I need to be. And that is a person who in publishing can, read 30 manuscripts a day and be excited for the next one still, and get through, lots of different tasks that seem unrelated without feeling like I wish I was doing this thing, that I'm more interested in. So really, when I was dabbling in crafts for a while, I had this phase where I wanted to make everything, and I had a blog, and I think I called myself, I called it Craft Renaissance, and the subtitle was like Jill of all trades, master of none, and it was kind of self-debating, because I was, frustrated that I couldn't just, nothing that I put my efforts toward came out to be like, oh my goodness, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in this category. They were always fine, but they weren't, and I've been able to kind of flip that script to understand that there are spaces in the world like homeschooling and publishing where that's an asset. So I would say I guess I realized that it is really a core personality trait, that I am interested and enthusiastic about a lot of things.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And it is a notable asset to homeschooling. I look at in my own life with homeschooling my kids, the ability to get excited with them if it's their mathematics that they're excited about, and or if it's science or chemistry, to be able to dabble in that and kind of feel their energy where they are. I think it's a wonderful asset. And so, and you talked about, I'm gonna draw back to a couple of topics that you hit on. One is homeschooling. You have 4 kids, you said, between 7 and 14. So homeschooling them is a huge endeavor in and of itself. How do you structure your days, your weeks, in order to accomplish everything that has to get accomplished to do those jobs well?
Yeah. It shifts every year. Every time they shift and my life shifts, we really have to reconfigure our schedule. And I would say this year, last year, and the pandemic helped a little in a weird, terrible way, have been the first years that I've been able to put a little bit more responsibility for their education onto them because of their ages, and that has helped a ton. And when they were younger, when they were all younger, when I had, even just 2 pre-readers, I really had to work in the margins, and I didn't have as much time for any endeavors, creative or otherwise. And so I just had to be at peace with prioritizing the homeschool and letting those other things fit into the cracks, wherever I could. And it was motivating. And I think it was still, even though maybe I wasn't as proficient or prolific in my work, my personal work, it was motivating to have those bits of time in between the homeschooling, and, fed back into being able to homeschool kind of from a full cup, But now that my youngest is in 2nd grade and reading fairly well, and my oldest, is so one of the things we've done this year is that my oldest, who is in high school, is taking quite a few online classes, and that does help a lot because he still needs me to guide him. He still needs me to make sure he understands what's necessary and help him when he has, technical difficulties or a concept is just too large for him to get with the information the teacher gave him. But he has another teacher to help. I have another person on my team now, several other people actually. And then I have actually this year also started paying my older 3 $1 a week. It's just so little, it just doesn't even, it's just so little to just have one subject that they help their little brother on. So, my oldest is helping him with math, and the next down is helping him with handwriting, and the next down is helping him with reading. And I've seen quite a bit of interesting, good fruit from that, actually.
Yeah.
They really have done fine. In fact, my daughter, I asked her the other night if she was tired of that. Do we need to change things? Would she like to have that time back? And it's not worth it, And she was like, I don't really mind it. And I said, well, I think he's old enough now. Like we've really gotten a good routine in the school year. I think that he could go back to doing that handwriting on his own. And I said, and she said, I think he'll still need some help. And I said, yeah, and I kind of talked about how it's hard for me to help him. And she, like this wise woman, said, well, Mom, here's my strategy. And she laid it out. And I thought, I've never thought of that before. She's 12. And I thought, what a blessing for him that he has, mom and sister and brothers to be part of his whole schooling experience in a different way than we've done before. So that's a lot of how we're doing it now. But essentially what we do is I work in the morning, and then in the afternoon, they have my attention to look through what they haven't finished and help them with what they had difficulties with. And then, we often have lessons or events, things in the late afternoon, evening. But I try, and for myself, basically 1 p.m. is when I switch my brain over.
Right. We've utilized that same tactic successfully with siblings, tutoring, for lack of a better word, tutoring each other on various subjects, in the relationship development, the accountability that blossoms out of that is such a beautiful process.
It is, yeah.
And when we first started, I thought, why didn't I do this sooner? Even just for the little things, right? Sit down and work on the ABCs or anything into that. Yeah. And to see, my oldest is 18 now, and to see him now sit down with my 5-year-old and read through, books together, where she's reading, that it's just a willing process now. It's not this is your responsibility. It's no, let's just sit and read together because we both enjoy it. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, my 10-year-old is reading above and beyond what he needs to read to the 7-year-old. And I had kind of a similar conversation with him, is this still working? What do we need to do? And he said, there are so many books that he's just not old enough to read himself yet, and he just really needs to read those. So I really want to keep reading to him, So it's great. They do, they get a different sense of, well, I think it must, I think for them, it also is gratifying because they realize that they do have something to offer the younger people, and that, that positive feedback for them is worth it too.
Yeah. And it's true. There are never enough hours in the day to So I'm gonna step back to discussing your career. Now, can you kind of, because you recently had, a notable reason for celebration in terms of your career, can you kind of go through, like you said, years ago, it was very much in the margins, like what steps, other than like the writing course and editing and what that you discussed, what has brought you to where you are today?
Yeah. When we were early married, we, took stock of all of our options and decided that we would go ahead and I would work and my husband would go to grad school. And we always had this idea that later on down the road, we would circle back. And if I wanted to go to grad school, then we would make that happen. Or, and I kind of decided I would continue figuring out what my career might be. And then when the youngest child was kind of settled into not toddlerhood, is the demarcation line that I gave myself. This is where I'm going to start thinking about taking something more challenging. And so I decided, to apply for grad school right before the pandemic happened. So my first plan ended up not actually happening. I did get into grad school, and I was in the middle of my first class when the pandemic really came down on us. And I had this moment where I thought to myself, like, this is so dramatic, but like, if these are our last days, do I want to be cramming for tests? Am I enjoying this? Is this really what I want to do? And, I was at the very beginning of this. So it's not just this class, it's so many more classes, for grad school. And it was pretty easy to say, no, this is not actually, it's hard to go back into education when you've been educating your children. It's like I was in a completely different space than most of the people in the class. And I made the difficult decision to go ahead and drop out of grad school without really another plan. That was kind of where I thought I was going to go. And took some time to grieve that a little bit, because it just seemed like the obvious next course. And now I didn't really have a backup. But after talking with some friends and, thinking through other options and not wanting to give up by any means on transitioning into a fuller career, a friend suggested, maybe you could get someone to let you into an internship. There are other routes into careers than just getting the next degree,
Right.
And, but it's also kind of hard to find someone to, accept a 30-something into an internship, because again, you're in a different place of life, So I ended up finding a certificate course through UCLA that did online courses, and trying to decide if I wanted to go the writing route or the editing route. They had a literary representation certificate, and I was only a little bit familiar with agenting, but I knew that literary agents do get to do a lot of that editing work. And, I just wasn't sure how I would like the contract negotiation aspect. I didn't have any experience in that. But I decided to take some classes, and it's just fallen into place so well. It is just so obviously this assimilation of all of my skills and interests. And the longer I went through that process, the more confident I felt that this was exactly the right thing that I didn't know was even out there, really, Yeah. And so I just finished that certificate. Again, it went slowly because of the pandemic. But before I was even finished, I went ahead and started applying for jobs, knowing that the other work I had done, I've done things on the side, like judging book contests from Writer's Digest, doing lots of writing in larger works like you have done. I wrote chapters in a book here or there, and then self-published some of my own things, and been in literary magazines and things. So I had a variety of experiences that I pulled, that I was coming into this with, plus my classes. And so thankfully I was able to find an agent, a New York agent, willing to take me under her wing a lot faster than I thought I was going to be able to. It's been really wonderful. And she's been essentially apprenticing me. And so, this last month, we made the big announcement that I'm no longer the assistant. I'm actually a full agent. So
Congratulations.
Thanks. So, it's wonderful. And, it's an industry, and there are lots of industries like this where in general, there's a very specific kind of way you get into that industry. And a lot of people move to New York, and they, take on the entry level job, and they really have a long, hard, arduous, task to get into these higher level positions. And that wasn't an option for me. And I'm glad, that is so hard. And I know that so many people have to put in that time, but I really do think that there's usually a creative workaround if it's something that you're determined to do. And it may take several tries at something, I thought maybe getting my graduate degree would give me that credential that then could kind of let me, skip in line. And that turned out not to be the right course. So.
Right. Oh, I love
Mhm.
that you were able to approach it creatively from outside the box and say, okay, well, here's my end goal, but here's where I am. How do I
Mhm.
navigate from A to B without having to do the standard route? Because, like you said, it wasn't an option. Homeschooling
Yeah.
4 kids
Mhm.
kind of eliminates that. I'm going to move to New York and work my way up the ranks.
Yeah. Well, and I can see someone with a different family structure and different, different life, saying, no, that's what we're going to do. I mean, you've done a little bit of that, if we're going
Yeah,
to, why not? Why not? And that's one of the great things about homeschooling is,
yeah,
we could have potentially, it would have
right,
been maybe too much to continue homeschooling and also work, an obscene number of hours out of the home. And so
right.
that might have eliminated it. But, I can see some people homeschooling is really great for that you can be flexible. In our family, because my husband's job is very localized, we really do have to be here for him to do this work,
Yeah.
and he enjoys it, and he's fulfilled. um, it wouldn't have been right to move, but I can definitely see someone else finding a very different creative workaround than the one that I chose.
Right. Oh, I'm so glad that it worked for you. So,
Yeah, me too.
in light of all of these, the different things that you have accomplished, what so on a daily basis or weekly basis, monthly basis, what are the most challenging parts of the day for you or for your structure as a family? What would you
Yeah,
say is the most challenging part of it to accomplish?
I think because I'm a morning person, I really can get more done in the morning. And I use the beginning part of my day to kind of prep for the day. I have chickens and pets and a wood stove to mess with, and all the things I have to do. Um, I try to cook a good breakfast for everyone
Yeah.
before I start work, and that's all fine because I have the energy for that. And then I'm still pretty good through work, and then when I get off work, and I should be switching my brain to, to paying attention to my kids. There's a lot that can sabotage that. It can get, I can be too tired because work was stressful, or I didn't prepare well and we don't have a good lunch. And then we're all, so I have to really, to be successful almost about mentally my whole day. And I have some friends who are very good at being spontaneous, and they don't really even plan, and they just keep doing the next thing, and that works so well for them. And I just can't. And I really have to know what I'm going to be making for dinner, and I really have to know what's on our schedule for the evening, and it can't be too many things.
Yeah.
And so for me to be successful, I guess I have to feel in control of all of those things. And then when I'm not in control, because of course that happens all the time,
Right.
to
Right.
really be able to just let go of it and breathe through it, and be okay with catching up later, and it's being able to just release that, because it's not fair for anyone for me to be cranky about
Right.
things not going the way I intended them. But that's a daily challenge. It's a daily challenge to be available for everyone and myself, and make sure that I've set myself up as well as I can, and then when it doesn't go how I want it to, that I'm still okay. So um
Yeah.
afternoons are kind of hard for me. My brain is divided between, let's finish the day well, and also I've already done so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's my hardest time. But I'm, again, my kids are so independent now. I'm definitely in a
Right.
place where that does not really make or break anything anymore. It has more to do with me modifying my attitude, than anything else. So
Well, like you said, breathing through it. And you and I both know that, right? We probably can both get up and look at the expanse of all that needs to happen during the day and know that when the irons get dropped, right, it's not because those things aren't going to happen.
mhm.
We just had to reposition when it is they're going to happen because they still have to happen. People still have to
Yeah.
eat. People still have to accomplish schoolwork. We still have to make it to these things. Somebody still has to get the groceries. So, hey,
hmm
it's a very realistic struggle to have.
Yeah, and I do think that even when I only had babies, even though that's a very intense time to have babies and toddlers, you're still in control of most things, you know. You
Yeah.
still get to decide. I mean, you know, they don't necessarily let you sleep, but you do get to decide, you know, what their day will look like as much as you can
Right.
control it. And the older kids get, the busier and more complicated it gets, and each child has their own need. And I do think it's a very natural growth that happens as kids grow. As a parent, that we grow that way too, that we are able to kind of loosen our reins a little, and recognize that there will be a time eventually when we have all that control back and we'll miss them desperately, you know. So
Right, when they are completely off doing something that has absolutely nothing to do with we have no say in it. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Someday.
Yeah, exactly. It's true.
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated to, go through all of this, rest and repeat?
Yeah. Um, Again, I just do think that my personality is an asset there, because even when I struggle, when I'm not in my best place, because I definitely, and Alaska is, like it can be hard in the winter. I definitely
Yep.
deal with seasonal affective disorder, and it's just dark all year round, even when it's not in Juneau, because Juneau is very wet. We're a temperate rainforest. Even when I'm feeling mentally not my best self, and having a hard time in general, that enthusiasm and that hope, it's so good. I'm so glad that I have it, because that spark never really goes away. So I have to remind myself sometimes when I am feeling unmotivated or under the weather, but mentally,
Right.
not physically, that that hope, like I'll find something I'm excited about again, and then I can lean into that, and sometimes that looks like pursuing something that's really just for me, that no one else cares about, and that is not really going to benefit my family. That's, and I don't mean to say that in like it's not going to hurt my family.
Right. Right.
But sometimes I need to do the thing that no one else is interested in, just because I know that it will help motivate me to continue doing all the other things I need to do,
Yeah.
There's a lot of little niche interests that I have that, the family just like, what are, why?
Never.
Like,
No.
it's some things that, some of them are silly little things that are like jigsaw puzzles. Sometimes if I just, clear the kitchen table and I'm like, I'm doing a jigsaw puzzle, no one bother me. Like, this is what
Yes.
this is what I'm doing. And that I probably do that once every 2 years, but that's something that just things like that I'm like, this is what I feel like doing right now. Sometimes I have to drop everything else within reason to do that thing. And that will continue motivating me. But I do have a wonderful partner in my husband, and he is always a good listener. He is my opposite in personality, so he's not going to be, going back and forth much in conversation unless I ask a direct question. But he's a great listener, and he will definitely let me talk out my day, and that's really helpful to have
And is
him.
obviously very supportive.
He's very, very supportive. And every time I feel doubtful about homeschooling, every time I'm, I don't know if I can do all these things, and something has to go, and I don't feel like I'm doing homeschooling justice. That's a constant, I think it's imposter syndrome, just like anything else. You feel like, am I doing everyone the best that I can? He's the one who's quick to say, think about this thing that our children can do or have experienced, or this trait of theirs. That's because of homeschooling. You're doing a great job, So he's very encouraging that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. He talks me, he talks me down a lot.
Oh, okay. So you have talked about becoming a literary agent, right? That was something that you had put off for years. Do you have anything else that you've put on the back burner of life that you still have out there of, I hope to accomplish, to do, I'll get there someday, 10 years, 20 years down the road?
Yeah, I do. I self-published some things because it made sense for those projects to self-publish. One of them, I really wanted to get into the hands of families struggling with homelessness or housing insecure families. And I knew that if I went the traditional publishing route, I wouldn't be able to control the price point, and I wouldn't be able to just donate books, excuse me.
Yeah.
And so then it made sense to self-publish some of the things that I've written, but I do want to traditionally publish, have my books in bookstores all over, the world eventually someday. And I did have to choose between, do I pursue that right now, or do I pursue the career that will pay me something right now? And then, and then think about that later, because there's no guarantees in either. But I did, I made the decision that because I have my hands in a lot of things right now, and because I need my creative energy for homeschooling, when I write, and I have continued to write, I often feel torn. I often feel like if I had more time to sit and focus on this would be better. And so, I did make the decision that right now, even though I'll continue writing a little bit for fun, and of course my job requires a lot of writing, that's not the same kind. That's a someday thing, someday when I have fewer things on the burners, I will sit down and try and write more long form fiction. But one of the things that's made that easier to swallow is I've written enough now to recognize that I get better every time. And that every time I invest myself in the writing process, that it comes out different and improved, and that you can't rush that really. And a lot of it is life experiences that make it better. I'm a different, wiser person, and I will continue, I hope, to become, a different, wiser, fuller person, and that will give me more to write about. So it's hard to be patient sometimes, knowing that sometimes it really is better, for some dreams to manifest later. So, but that's something that definitely I still hope for, but I don't have it on my 5-year plan,
Right. And I love how you brought in the fact that life experience really adds to that. I'm currently reading Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And in the intro, he talks there's much about that so many of these things that we can write and manifest are from our personal experiences. Mm-hmm. And, in a book like Crime and Punishment, some of that is tragic, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's true. But you can't write authentically from experiences if you, haven't had some exposure at least to them. And that does take time. We're constantly living life. I mean, that's, that's where
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go for it.
I was going to say, what are you currently reading?
I'm finally reading Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So it's a sci-fi, and he's the author of The Martian, and they made the movie about it. So the Martian was his first, and he was kind of a breakout, crazy bestseller that originally self-published. So he didn't even go the traditional routes in his career, and his writing was just so captivating that then they published it, which is not the normal route of things. If you've self-published something, it's really hard to get a book deal, and then they made a movie of it. And so now he's gotten a lot of interest in his writing, and Project Hail Mary is not his second. It's actually, I think, maybe his fourth even. And the other two in between didn't do as well. And this one is just phenomenal. And another example of creatives growing, that he was kind of unexpectedly famous, and then now he's just continuing to really get better and better. But it's kind of a first contact story, but he's just a really great science writer. So you don't just get, and also it's very cinematic, it's not dry at all. You feel like you're watching the movie while you read it, so it's very motivating to keep reading. Yeah. And he just puts in, he includes physics and, astrophysics, obviously, and, all kinds of math and science that normally you would just I would just, not even be interested in such an engaging way that you feel like you're getting smarter reading this, sci-fi thriller. So it's really great. And my husband and my teenage son both read it and have just been so upset with me that I haven't gotten to it yet. And I'm like, I'm reading a lot of things right now.
I have all of this on my list, that especially my 15-year-old is like, Mom, you haven't read this yet.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's worth the read. I'm like, I know I'll enjoy it when I finally get to it, but guys, give me a break.
Right. Do you have any literature that has truly inspired you? Something, it could be written at any point in time, fiction, nonfiction, something that has truly spoke to you that that you could share with us.
Yeah. I talk about books all day, and I could just keep going all day too. It's hard for me to even narrow down things that were most impactful, because I feel like books have been the most impactful part of people like me often almost talk about books as if they're living things, like they're the people, but it's almost, if you could count books as an entity. Books have been very impactful in my life, but one that that I've read multiple times, that I really continue to draw from, and every time I think about it, I think I need to read that again, is My Antonia by Willa Cather. So my family is Czech. One part of my family is from Bohemia, what we now call the Czech Republic, and came over to the United States at the same time as the main character of that book, Antonia, or they would say, Antonia. I always said My Antonia when I was a kid, and then I realized it's My Antonia. So I have to switch my brain every once in a while when I say it. Have you read that book, or are you familiar with it?
I have never read it, and interestingly enough, a friend just gifted it to us. So it arrived here a couple of weeks ago on my husband's last trip back home, and so I'm eager to read it, and now more eager.
I think that knowing you will really enjoy it, but it is, it's technically historical fiction, and it was, even when it was written. Now it's a classic, but even when it was written, it was historical fiction about an immigrant family, and families who came from Bohemia, did not speak any English. Czech is a more Slavic language, and there were not very many crossovers. And so when they came to, the U.S., and it was still during westward expansion, they were coming into the middle part of the U.S., and they may have been neuroscientists, they may have been any number of very specialized careers, and their only work for them was farming. And of course, some of them found joy in that, and some of them succeeded in that. Some of them even wanted to farm, and that's where we moved. But this book centers around kind of a tragic story of a family that was, they came to the United States for like the great American dream, and really could not assimilate, could not fit in. And this was during a time when in Nebraska, in this area, they were still living in sod houses, mud and sod, dried. But that means bugs and poor air circulation and all kinds of things. And it's really this story of that grasping to to make it better for their next generations. It's almost like the families that came, the father who makes the decision to move his family. It's almost like he's just, my life is now done, and it's you for the next generation. And it's so heart-wrenching. But I just find every time I read it something more to be inspired by, because things didn't go well for these people, and yet they just had this wellspring of hope. And it's based very closely on true people. So even though it's fiction, it just feels very real because it was. And thinking about the things that my ancestors had to go through to get me to where I am. And you know, I had a hard childhood, but my mom's childhood was even harder, and her mom's childhood was even harder. And just thinking about how there is this long game, and it's not a game, obviously. There's this, you know, this long
Vision.
it takes generations, you know, of perseverance sometimes to get us where we are, and we, you know, have that opportunity for our children too, to make their lives even better than ours were. And it makes me grateful every time I read it, you know, just very humbled by where I am compared to where I could be. So
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. So to add to the inspiring figures, do you have anybody, you know, from history, a historical figure that has impacted your perspective in life?
yeah, lots, you know. I am Catholic, but kind of newly Catholic. Our family converted in 2018. And before that, we had kind of lived as Protestant Christians for 20 years. And one thing that Catholicism has that Protestant Christianity doesn't pay a lot of attention to are the saints. And that has really shifted my mindset of learning from people who have gone before in a way that almost makes them your friend. You know, that there's a connectedness in history where these people who lived before you are still, you know, they're still impacting you in kind of a metaphysical way. And there are a lot of saints, but it's not just Catholic figures that it's got me thinking that way about. I found a new connectedness to recognizing that there's a connection between humans, that people that you wouldn't think have any direct, you know, impact on your life really are part of the larger story. And some of the ones that are always interesting to me, and this makes total sense to me now, like in a self-analytical way, are the polymaths. Everyone who you know, I read about them and I think, you know, they knew things about everything. They knew things about so many things, and it's one person making an impact in like just so many different disciplines is just phenomenal to me, what humans are capable of. And this may sound like super silly, but I am a big Benjamin Franklin fangirl. It's like probably not what anyone would expect me to say about like inspiring historical figures, but because of homeschool, every time we learn about him in particular, but there's several others, Da Vinci, and, you know, several others that I think the capacity of humanity, and it's not every human, obviously, we don't all need to be polymaths, but it always really interests me to learn about figures who are capable of really grasping a lot from different areas. And another one is Hildegard, Saint Hildegard. She's some of the oldest recorded music, but she also was like an herbalist, and, you know, inspired and changed medicine in her time, and so many other things. You know, she's a scholar. So yeah, pretty much when someone mentions a polymath, that gets my attention. I often wonder what their personalities were like. Could you hold that much in and still be a functioning person? But it seems like a lot of them were. Benjamin Franklin is one of those, which is why
he definitely was. Yes. Yeah. And to see the global impact that he had. I mean, here homeschooling in France, in history, they have to learn about Benjamin Franklin and his contributions distinctly to French society, which I had no idea that we would encounter that here.
I think about the time that he spent away from his family in France and how impactful he was. And that makes me feel so bad for his family too. You know, there's a lot of feelings there. I feel very personally connected to, invested in his life. Like, that must have been so hard for everyone. Everything I've read about or from him has made me think deeply.
Well, in speaking of that larger vision, right? His vision was obviously massive to be able to look at it, of taking that time away from his family, away from his comforts, to pursue something far beyond himself. The greater vision.
Yeah.
that will impact globally for generations.
hmm And not just the Americas, obviously, but
Right.
and his vision, I think, was even larger than what's come to pass in some ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. But yeah, we're still definitely living in the ramifications of his choices, and a lot of his efforts were very relational too. He didn't necessarily go about things in the same way that everyone else in the time was going about things. So
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
it's very true. Okay, one more question for you. What advice would you give to somebody in your position 10 or 20 years ago? What advice would you, now I am a big believer in the fact that everything that I've encountered in my life has come at the time when it was supposed to, right?
hmm
And yet there's little snippets of, God, if I had only known or implemented that so many years
hmm
ago, if I had been aware of this so many years ago, what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I'd say I spent a lot of time feeling bad for myself. Back in those times when I felt very overwhelmed by motherhood, I would look at the people around me who had a different support system. They had grandma, or they had a sister nearby, and I would feel limited because I didn't have so many people to ask for help. I didn't have childcare, things like that. Um, I wish I could have told myself that fire refines, and that even though it was very difficult during that time, having to push hard against my challenges grew me faster. Maybe if I could tell myself that, it wouldn't have worked. I don't know. But but I guess I would tell myself to. I don't know that I would have been receptive of this, but to count my blessings a little better, because I
Yeah.
did spend a lot of time feeling feeling ungrateful for the challenges, rather than feeling grateful for my opportunities or accepting the challenges as opportunities.
Right.
And I mean, there's no doubt that it was just hard, to have 4 small children, and
Yeah.
to have dreams, and to have to put a lot of myself to the side, because that's just how that time of parenting works. And to feel like I was delaying my career, for instance. But I was not delaying it. I was working on my career on the side. I was living life. I was gaining new experience and new insight. And I was doing a lot of good, and I still am. I was doing important things, and I knew that on one level, but it was easy to lose sight of. Easy to tell myself that I could do more if. And of course, I could have done more, but that doesn't mean it would have been more impactful. The impact I was having at that time was still exactly what I needed and what they needed. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's a natural. I think in our youth we can't see that it's a there's not before children, after children, career, retirement. It's not like these chunks of time, it's an
Right.
evolution constantly. And it looks
It
different
is.
every single year. And that's right and good because we
Oh,
grow
it's
every single
great.
year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And thank goodness for that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, with a little bit of perspective, and we're not that old, so we'll have much more perspective later, but
Right.
with a little bit of perspective, it's easy to see how impatient youth is, just kind of, why were we so impatient? There's just so much
Yeah.
more,
What was
there's
I
still
in
so
such
much
a
more.
hurry for? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because we thought I'll speak for myself. I thought that at some point you'll feel like you've arrived, and I didn't listen to anyone who said that doesn't happen.
Oh, right.
you
Oh, I
know,
remember years ago a dear friend of mine saying to me, like we're adults now. We're not practicing. We've been practicing for so long. This is what we're supposed to be living. And it was
yeah,
kind of a revelation of, wow, you're right. What are we practicing for anymore?
yeah,
Other than the everyday existence of how we keep moving forward, how we utilize each experience
hmm
to refine us, to inspire us, to drive us.
hmm
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you can hang on to that and recognize that growth is still happening, then there's a lot of hope in that. And if you are disappointed by the fact that, that, it doesn't become magically, easy, or we don't suddenly, arrive, that could be discouraging. The opposite of that could be true. So yeah, definitely recognizing that there's still a long way to go, even from where we have come, where we are.
Right. Are you saying you haven't found an easy button yet? I haven't.
Nope. No.
I used to look for one, and now I think, okay, this really is just what it is, right? This challenge too, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, I really did used to think that once I found that thing that I'm good at, that one thing that I'm better at than anyone else, and that's my, my calling, once I could finally narrow myself down and limit myself to focus on something, that it would all get easy. So yeah, it wouldn't, especially for me, because that's not even who I am, that's not even, I would have limited myself unnecessarily. So yeah.
It's true. That would be a very limiting perspective. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah.
So do you have a quote that you could leave us with?
Oh, I wonder. I have a thing of quotes here. Maybe we'll see if this one is this isn't going to do anything for us. I have a calendar of quotes, and I thought, well, today's December. And so December 1st, what is my quote? And it's, "I'm excessively diverted, Jane Austen." But maybe it is appropriate.
Maybe it is appropriate. It's probably more appropriate than us would like to acknowledge.
Because, maybe that is exactly who I am.
And I love that it's by Jane Austen.
Yes. Yes. I think I'll just leave it at that. I don't think I have anything more inspiring prepared. So
I think that's perfect. Can you point us in a direction of where people can find you, whether it's your place as a literary agent, or personally, a website, a link, anything of the sort?
Definitely. So kind of a hub of where you can find me is anjanettebarr.com. I am all over, not every social media, goodness, but the social media that I am on is Book Barista with 2 R's. So I'm on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook, though it just feeds directly in from Instagram, because we're, smarter, not harder. And then my literary agency is Dunham Literary, and so we're at dunhamlit.com. But again, if you go to anjanettebarr.com, there'll be a link there, so you can find me in all those places.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. Yes, it's so good to see you and be with you. Yes.
Yes, you too.